now we have another exciting and perhaps somewhat provocative panel, if I might say. And of course, we have equally prominent panelists in the person of Jeffrey Armstrong ji and Pandit Satish Sharma ji. And we have a very able moderator, Dr. Paro Sarkar. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Paro ji, and thank you.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Jayji, and welcome again to all the folks attending this conference. And thank you to our sponsors of this conference, the Hindu Dharma, Hindutva, Hindudvesha Conference. This is second day, second session. And the topic of this session is Christianity, Race, and the Hindu World. And we have two distinguished panelists with us, Jeffrey Armstrong and Pandit Satish Sharma. Jeffrey ji is an award-winning poet and best-selling author. He is the founder of VASA, Vedic Academy of Science and Arts. He is an international speaker and has spoken on many platforms. His journey has been from a Western perspective into the dharmic world, and he has made it his life's mission to spread awareness and knowledge about Vedic wisdom, customs, and practices, and how to integrate them into our lives. Pandit Satish Sharma ji is in UK, and he is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, holding a BSc. He is also a member of the Chartered British Computer Society. He is a powerful voice in speaking up for Hindu causes, Hindu rights, and educating us. He has written a book on caste and coloniality that will provide much needed perspective on how to approach conversations in that realm. From our previous session, it is very obvious that we have a great story, but the narrative is not ours. So having said that, I will defer to our esteemed panelists. First, Pandit Satish Sharma ji, and the next Jeffrey Armstrong ji, to walk us through this terrain of various stories, narratives, terminologies that are out there that we have inherited from our colonial past and how to navigate that terrain. So thank you. Pandit Satish Sharma ji, if you're ready.
Ramji, namaskar, and Jai Shri Ram to everybody. I hope I'm being heard clearly. Is the technology doing what it's supposed to do? Thank you so much. Being of a dharmic tradition, I know my place in the grand scheme of things. And it's not my place to speak before Jeffrey ji. So I would really love to defer to Jeffrey ji if he would like to lead the conversation. I would be more than happy to follow. He is certainly my senior in terms of knowledge, experience, certainly in terms of sadhana. And so I would be more than happy to follow. Jeffrey ji, please do take the stage, and I will pick up at some point in time when you wish for me to participate. So I'm here awaiting your invitation. Thank you very much, Jeffrey ji.
Yad yad acharati sheshtas tad evetaro janaha. Well, my Acharya friend and companion at this moment in history that is so important. I was so happy you were starting, but that's the way it is. I think one of the most beautiful parts of the Vedic Dharma is, no, you go first, Swamiji. No, you go first. Because we are naturally humbled by one another's greatness and perhaps a little tired of our own inadequacies. But I always begin by saying, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. At this particular historical moment, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this Hindu Heritage Month, this historical moment is a gathering, very much like in the Itihas, in the Mahabharata. That gathering of beings was arranged by Bhagavan in order to illuminate the most important principles that would endure for thousands and thousands of years again. And we're in just such a moment of redefinition. So some of us are coming from one angle and some are coming from another angle. But what is unifying all of us is that we are all immortal beings. And we have come here to be of some seva in this interesting historical moment. As I listened to my brethren who were traumatized as a culture in Bharat through colonization and the ravages that the Christian religion left behind in the last 300-400 years. I came from a Christian background and emerged from it because it could not answer questions. At that time, I didn't know that they were a library burning religion. I hadn't become a scholar yet. Instead, I was listening to their story and it wasn't satisfying. I sensed something was wrong. So I began to ask questions. What I really didn't know at all at the time was that that was Samkhya, that I was in a childish way reaching out with the questions that were not being answered. So just as the Abrahamic religions, both of Islam and Christianity, violated their own principles and became library burning, destructive, they're really not religions, but gangs of people that would do anything violent and despicable in the name of religion. Coming from one of those backgrounds, I became critical and thoughtful. And it wasn't until the Vedic gurus began to come to the West. I have a way of saying this, that first, the British went to India and other European cultures went around the world and stole everything they could get their hands on in the name of Jesus. Should think about that for a moment. Who's depicted as kind and loving and gentle. Well, I don't think that's the experience of the cultures of the world. We're in recovery from an age of thievery and domination and lying and making up untrue frames, stories about cultures in order to justify pillaging them. Coming from that background without knowing about all of those things, there were missing vitamins in the Christian worldview. And I noticed right away and began to bring them to my elders in the Christian community, and they didn't like my questions much. So to speed forward, when the gurus from Bharat came, the way I like to say it is that first the country was pillaged, the wealth was stolen, and just at the last minute, just in the 60s, the gurus of India said, wait. You stole everything, but you didn't get the crown jewels. Here, let us give your children the Vedic knowledge. What a miracle it was to persons like myself to get answers to the questions that no one would answer in Western civilization. Who am I really? You're an immortal being. How did I get here? You came here from Brahman. Where am I? You're in Prakriti. You're in a place that is constructed by cause and effect. And you, being an immortal being, have many, many lifetimes and have had many, many lifetimes. And you're here learning. So I call this universe the university. But what I learned from my various gurus was the Sanskrit words which shed light upon the situation of being here in a beautiful and universal way. And they taught us how to sing through the mantras of the Veda and how to find that part in us that is immortal and bring it alive again. So those of us coming in from the outside, we're not traumatized exactly the way the people from inside the Vedic culture were. We were traumatized by not having it, by not having the wisdom, by not having the Vedic Vidya, by not knowing the Sanskrit, by not reading the Bhagavad Gita. And step by step, the acharyas of Bharat brought us in, accepted us. I went into an ashram at age 23, spent 5 years as a brahmachari, burning out the samskaras of my birth. It is as if Bhagavan wanted to show everyone that this process is a process that works for everyone. You're not just born into it. It's universal. It's true for everyone. The Vedic Vidya, Acharya, immortal, Parama, Vedanta, all these great concepts were given to those of us who did not have them, who honestly felt, oh Magana, Timirandasya, Yanangana Salakaya, Chakshur Unmilitam, Gena Tasmai, Shri Gurave Namaha. So you see, these few brave gurus and acharyas who came to the West landed, and we who had been in Bharat in previous lives said, I would like to help by going and taking birth in the enemy's camp. And now this great meeting of Hindu Heritage Month is various kinds of us coming together from two different trajectories. One, traumatized as a culture and recovering from those traumas. The other, traumatized by being from the country. For example, I was born in the United States. This is the country who dropped atomic bombs on innocent women and children in Japan. This is the most despicable thing one can imagine. Why isn't it talked about that way? I talk about it that way. And do you know that when President Truman dropped the nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he had the audacity to say, I hope that God is pleased with us in what we're doing? It's heart-rendering. It's heartbreaking that a culture would even suggest such a thing. And so the Vedic Sanatana Dharma culture is now the bridge throughout history. The Sanskrit language is the conduit by which the answers to all these questions are coming forward. And notice hundreds of millions of new yogis around the world. Who funded that? No one. So in the midst of the most violent behaviors we've seen in history, this great knowledge of the Vedic Vidya has gone out into the world. So if I could offer a bit of enthusiasm and encouragement to the Vedic community, it is, with Westerners, get specific Sanskrit words and learn them, about 100 or so. and then use those words to stabilize the conversation. Say less, not more. Say Brahman. Say you are an Atma. My favorite verse in the Bhagavad Gita is Bahudam Janmanamante, Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. We are in the process of seeing who is a Duratma and who is a Mahatma, of reviving the definition of what are we really, who are we really, why are we here? Escape from the political conversation by articulating the Vedic worldview, Brahman, Prakriti, the Atma, Paramatma. All this terminology in the Bhagavad Gita, gunas, doshas, samsara. The world is suffering because it has the wrong world view. And now this opportunity has arisen to use a few crucial worldview Sanskrit words to define those clearly and correctly in English, and to re-establish in this Vedic Renaissance the world view of the Sanatana Dharma culture, which I call the Hindu Vedic Sanatana Dharma culture. Yes, Hindu is in there, but Hindu Vedic Sanatana Dharma culture, you have to teach a new vocabulary to your enemies and not use theirs for yourself, nor for the knowledge. And speak slowly and make sure that a few concepts were understood. Just the simple concept that we are immortal beings going from life to life and learning on a grand adventure, and that this is the culture of the Mahabharata. This is the culture of the Bhagavad Gita. This is the Vedic Sanatana Dharma culture. When we say namaste, we're saying it all. We're saying, I see every living entity as an immortal being in what I call the university, here in the university. And instead of losing sight of that in an argument, we must arrange not to lose sight of it, to say that we look at every living entity with respect and admiration as an immortal being. So anyone who says that the Vedic culture is about a caste system doesn't understand that it's about honoring and respecting every living entity. It's about sustainability on Mata Bhumi, on Mother Earth. Bhumi is where the word human came from. Humi, home, human. Bhumi, human. Manu. The Sanskrit roots are the secret. Slow it down. Don't be in the frame of your enemy. One word at a time. Unfold the Vedic worldview until the vocabulary is known by your children. And every Hindu youth throughout the world is armed with 108 Sanskrit words that articulate their worldview. They don't get lost when there's an argument. They go back to the truth of that worldview. They teach one at a time these Sanskrit words that illuminate the Vedic worldview and stabilize it. Otherwise, you'll get lost in the politics of the moment. You'll get lost in adversarial debates, and you'll speak too quickly and people won't understand what you said and they won't remember any of it because it wasn't enough The word is the words they could hold on to and grab before we go. I have less than 5 minutes left. We are all immortal Atmas. When we look at each other with those eyes, the game changes. All this beauty is a reflection of Bhagavan. Bhagavan, that being who has 6 amazing qualities to an unlimited degree, and to whom all of us are attracted. Krishna, charisma, Christ. Christ is just the word Krishna, mistranslated into English. But we have to slow down and take charge of the conversation. Otherwise, we'll be swept up into the animosity of the world ethos right now. And it will just seem like one more quarrel in a world about to destroy itself. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityur ma amritam gamaya. From darkness, lead me to light. From a lack of truth, lead me to that truth. I'm an immortal being, so lead me back to being who I truly am. And with that, I hand it over to my dear friend Satish. And thank you for giving me a moment to participate in this Interheritage Month.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey G, for that wonderful talk and really calming us down in a very turbulent topic that we are navigating. And over on to you, Pandit Satish Sharma Ji, to take us through further in this conversation.
Ramji, Namaskar Ji, and Charan Sparsh Jeffrey Ji, and for everybody else who is joining us this afternoon. I hope that everybody has understood how wise I am in deciding to follow Jeffrey Ji and allow him to lead, because it's so easy to follow Jeffrey Ji. He sets the stage and the context so beautifully. Jeffrey Ji Pranam. You concluded with Asato ma satgamaya. May we be guided, may we move from asat, that which is unreal, towards a glimpse of reality. And this is at the heart of our Sanatani journey. If I was asked to pick one sentence, one verse, one shloka, which would define the difference between the journey of a Sanatan Dharma, I would choose that, because we are in a search for reality. And that's where I'm going to pick up and start my few moments of conversation from. There is a prerequisite before conversations of this nature can be embarked upon. And that prerequisite is that we disarm ourselves, we intellectually disarm ourselves. And we have a wonderful mantra which encapsulates this, and I'm just going to start with that. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvi Navadhitam Astu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti 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 Om. And this invocation is an invitation as well. May divinity guide us and protect us. May we learn from each other in a spirit of affection, of trust. May our efforts together be rewarded with illumination. And may there never be harsh words between us. So that last sentence is the most important one, because if we accept the precondition that we're determined not to use harsh words, it suddenly makes us available and present just to the subject that we're going to be talking about. And the subject that we're going to be talking about is so important that it warrants serious reflection and scrutiny. And that's only possible when we're all calm, relaxed, and aware that what we're doing is for the benefit of everybody. So that's where I'd like to start our conversation. So much to speak of, and Jeffrey Ji, you have churned the ocean so much that I have thoughts flooding in, and I'm now trying to assimilate them and weave them into the conversation. But we have 200 plus people participating in this event today. And I have a request to them first. If this was in front of an audience, I would be asking each of them to reflect for a moment on what their pronouns are. We have currently a conversation where we speak of he, she, they, etc. And this notion of pronouns has really become center stage. So for a moment, if you can just ask yourself, what is it that you would choose as your pronoun? He, she, whatever. And the reason I'd like to start there is that this is a new development in the West. The notion that a person can introspect, self-scrutiny is applied, and then decide on how they wish to be addressed. Now, self-scrutiny is a fundamental part of our journey, and many of you who are yoga dhyapakas, yoga sadhaks, and so on will know the phrase swadhyaya, self-scrutiny. That is at the heart of a Sanatani's journey. And I chose this pronoun idea to start the conversation with because it also establishes a freedom. It establishes the freedom of an individual to self-scrutinize and self-define. This is an accepted principle which has emerged out of Western introspection, intellectual contemplation, and it has been accepted. And I start here because if you assume that to be true for an individual, then we also, as a civilization, as a nation, have the opportunity and the human right and the freedom to self-identify. It is our freedom to be able to determine how we wish to be addressed, how we wish to be identified, how we wish to be understood. It is nobody else's right and nobody else's power. And this is something that our Sanatani family really needs to understand and accept. We are a family. There may be issues within our family, but one thing is certain, and it's a piece of advice given to a child in a Punjabi village at a very early age. And that is that if there is a family dispute, don't involve a third party. Sort it out amongst yourselves, because you never know what it is that is driving the third party, what their needs are, what their biases are, what their prejudices are. All of those add confusion. So step number one on our journey is the recognition that we can choose who we are, how we choose to name ourselves, what our terms mean in our language, which will be very, very relevant to the conversation about Hindutva. It is for us to explain what it means, not for anybody else to lecture us on what they think it can be meaningful. That's the first part. So please, now that you all have comfortably acquired the power to self-define your own pronouns, and I've planted the seeds, I hope that we can take that and move forward with it. Swadhyaya is a fundamental part of who we are. And it also introduces yet another dimension into the Sanatani's journey, self-scrutiny. Dhyaya is to hold in attention, to hold something in your awareness for a sustained period of time. Dhyana is the journey where we have acquired this particular ability. So Swadhyaya is about attention, and attention is about looking. Now, looking is the second aspect I wanted to introduce, because we are blessed with the freedom and the guidance that we should look and see what it is that we then discover. We are taught to look. We are taught that looking is more reliable than mentally creating ideas, intellectual schemes, interpretations, belief systems, and all of those things. In our tradition, we look. And this is why we have rishis, which is from the word drishta, which is to see, to look. It's the capacity to scrutinize something deeply. And this is very important, because if you determine that your journey of asatoma satgamaya is to be based upon looking, then you, one, become a seeker, and two, you become a seer. You are learning to look at things. And that is an amazing, amazing lesson. When our rishis our incredible and unique ancestors started on this journey of looking. They looked inwards. And this is something that's available to all of us. Each and every one of us at every moment has an opportunity to look inwards. And we are the only tradition who systematized and who roadmapped that whole journey. When our ancients looked inwards, they discovered what the tattva of a human being was. And the tattva of a human being they found beyond physical form, beyond mental form. They dived deeply and found something which was at the heart and the center of every single human being, so much so that none of the physical attributes, the Panchkoshas, the Sapt Dhatus, the 7 Dhatus, the 5 Vayus, they plunged beyond all of those and they found something which was the life essence which nourished and supported everything else. And that was the tattva, the defining essence of what it is to be a human being. That's what they found inside. And the remarkable thing was that they navigated the continent of mind and left it behind to find an oasis of stillness at the very center of our being. And it's there at the center of every single human being. They then stopped and they thought, this is so amazing. We want to share this incredible gift with anybody and everybody. And what they did is they sat and they started to speak. And they spoke in the most magical language that humanity has ever known. The outpouring created the 4 Vedas, which is some 20,337 verses. They created the Mahabharata, which is 1.8 million words, over 200,000 shlokas, 10 times the length of the Odyssey and the Iliad put together in one completely perfect poem. They recorded the Ramayana, 24,000 plus verses. And each and every one of these masterful scriptures has one purpose: to guide a person inwards and to navigate the outside world in a manner that we perpetuate society so others can be born and find a way to guide themselves inwards. And that's all there is to all of our Shastras. Each and every shloka is a signpost. Each and every Shastra is an A to Z, a roadmap, Google Maps for the human being. This is what's enshrined in our Shastra. And if you actually reflect for a moment, if I were to ask you what is the most important part of your whole universe, if you are wise, you will come to the conclusion that you are the most important part. And frankly speaking, to be honest, you are the most interesting part of your universe as well. You know, once we put aside all of the social conditioning, each of us loves to have a horoscope. We love to consult a master Jyotishi like Jeffrey, because we want to know who we are and what we are. That search for the inner journey is built into this human form. And this is where we are also unique. That search is a part of what we are. If you reflect upon your physical form, you will notice that it does most amazing things. If you get a cut or an injury on your hand, it will heal itself without your intervention, without your participation. Blood appears, seals the wound, the scar is there for a short while, and then even if it's on the surface of your hand, even the fingerprints are reproduced from a blueprint that we don't even know exists. So this physical form that we occupy is an incredible creation. It has built into it the capacity to catapult Jivatma towards Paramatma. It is built into this physical form. All of our Shastra and all of our guidance does one thing. It tries to remove the obstacles that we keep placing in front of this physical form on what it's trying to do. Our journey is about becoming natural, is about trying to see who we are and where we are so that we can become completely natural and fulfill our naturally naturally designed journey. The attention went inwards with the same level of scrutiny and attention to detail. Imagine you were an archaeologist walking in the desert and you saw some sort of an artifact half buried in the sand. What would you do? You would seize that artifact, have a look at it, and start to scrutinize it. You would test it. You would see how strong it was. You'd see how sharp it was. And you would then begin to understand what its purpose might be. That's what Sanatana Dharma is. Only we do that with ourselves. We turn our attention inwards and we test this body. We have Hatha Yoga to test what this body is, to learn what this body is, and to heal this body. We have Gyan Yoga, which is to test the mind, to scrutinize the mind, to heal the mind, and then transcend it. We have Bhakti Yoga, which is the way to heal a broken, damaged heart. We have every single element of Vidya necessary to repair and to make tranquil this physical form that we suddenly find ourselves occupying. And it's the most interesting form in all of existence. That same intelligence, that same scrutiny, that same dhyana, we turned outwards. And when we turned it outwards, we discovered dharma. We looked and we saw how the whole of the universe worked together so that every jiva in this whole of the universe could exist with ebullience, with incredible happiness, with radiance, and with love. Unending, completely immersive Anand. This is what we discovered when we applied our scrutiny to the outside world. We discovered an order, the way in which everything works. And then we also discovered that we are the only form which has the capacity to transcend this universe. That we have the capacity to see how it works and then to look beyond it. But that very capacity is also a vulnerability, because what happens is by, shall we say, attachment to two of the Purusharth, by Kam and Arth, when we become attached and intoxicated with Kam and Arth, we act in a manner which is detrimental to ourselves and indeed to the Brahman. And that's what we call adharma. Now, something which is very relevant at this point, I want to take a little bit of segue, because we are at a very important point in time. And I'm going to take you back to two places, almost 2,000 years ago in history, when something remarkable happened. And that remarkable thing happened in Judea, but it was observed in Rome. At that time, Constantine had a Roman Empire which he was struggling to control. He had an army he was struggling to pay. He had a population which was beginning to become quite rebellious and refusing to pay taxes. But news came out of Judea that there were a bunch of people who were actually willing to kill themselves and kill each other for an idea. And this he found intriguing. So when he scrutinized what was going on, he found that it was possible to give a certain number of ideas to people when they were vulnerable, so much so that they would completely lose sight of who they were. They would lose that sense of awe of being here and be willing to sacrifice themselves for an idea. And so he thought, wow, this is incredible. What if I could spread this idea throughout my empire? If I could use this technique, I could teach this whole population to actually respect the empire. I could teach them to enslave themselves. I wouldn't need an army. And for heaven's sake, they would even pay taxes. Perhaps the figure of 10% might be a nice figure. If I can convince them to pay 10% to me at the center of my empire, I can dispense with the need for an army. This was how clever he was. He started the scheme, and then Theodosius, who followed him, completed the scheme, and he reversed his Roman Empire into something that we call a religion. And religion was born. They learned how to cripple the divine human faculty of wisdom and how to cripple the divine human heart. And they used guilt to cripple the human heart, so much so that that journey that we said at the beginning, that Jeffrey said, the journey from Asat to Satya, they put an obstacle in the way. And that obstacle is what religion is. Now I'm going to I have to live up to the introduction where somebody introduced the notion that this may be a provocative conversation. So that's an invitation which the Punjabi in me is saying, yes, yes, be provocative. What we have today are people who have taken the technology, the knowledge of how to cripple a human heart and cripple human intellect in order to enslave human beings so that they can contribute towards a system which is self-serving and self-sustaining, but totally adharmic. Now, if you recognize that, you will recognize that Bharat has always been the custodian of the tools to heal the broken intellect and to heal the damaged heart. And this is why Sanatana Dharma and the children of Bharat are being subjected to so much pressure at this moment in time. It's an existential problem for the religiously minded dictators, those for whom the dictator is a divine dictator who you can't see. He's imaginary, the imaginary dictator in the sky, but who must be obeyed, and fear and guilt are the tools which determine how we're enslaved. So we are the custodians of an understanding which can heal all of humanity. This is an issue that we need to recognize. Now, I'm hoping that in our conversation, I will have given enough seeds for thought for our younger members to recognize that we are not a religion. I've defined what a religion is. We are not a religion. We are a wisdom tradition. All of the pre-Christian traditions were wisdom traditions. They were seekers. They were dharmic. They recognized the Great Spirit. They recognized how it infused all of existence in the planet that we live in. And that's what we are the custodians of. I'll conclude, because I want to wrap it up and still have time for conversations, but I'll conclude with one small idea. I was at a wedding in India not so long ago, and there were a group of the groom's friends were all white English people from East London. And on the first night, they all piled into the bar and they were having celebratory drinks, and I sort of wandered in and sat with them. And one of them who'd had too much to drink, a young white lad from East London, he came and sat next to me and he said, Satish, there's something funny about India. I've always heard that people come to India to find themselves. And I've been here for a few hours and I'm not feeling any change yet. And so I told him to have a couple more pints and he would feel the change. But I'm sharing that because India has had the reputation where people go to find themselves. If you go to Rishikesh, you will see the Israeli 20-year-olds who have served 2 years in the army and have been so shaken by it that they go to Rishikesh, to India, to find themselves. This is the tradition that we have. And the reason people can come to Bharat to find themselves is because we help them to transcend identity. Identity is what it is that can be used to enslave us. And if you are a Sanatani, you are born into a tradition which can transcend all identities. The tattva of a Hindu is the capacity to transcend all identities. And I would submit that to you as my closing remark. And thank you very much for bearing with me. I may have slightly exceeded the time, but I hope everybody received something from it. And if not, my apologies. And with that, Baroji, I'd be honored to hand it back to you. Thank you very much, everybody. Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you, Satish Ji. And before we move on to Q&A, I'd like to give another minute or so back to Jeffrey Ji to kind of round up the conversation, since we have had a wonderful journey in this conversation where I feel myself as somebody who's been sitting in a beautiful house and somebody's taking me by the hand and said, well, have you gone outdoors? The view that you're admiring from your window, there's more to it. So thank you, both of you. And Jeffrey Ji, if you would like to take a minute to collect us together and before we head into question and answers, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Paro. It's a very important principle in martial arts, in the Kshatriya Dharma, not to be controlled by someone who considers themselves your enemy, not to play their game, but to stay steady in yours. And if yours is not just a game, but if it's a dharma, if it's rooted in the well-being of all living entities, if it's a voice of kindness and caring, there's only a few things that will change the situation at all. The medicine that everyone is looking for is from the heart. It's heart medicine. The word cardiac is hridaya. I am in the heart of all living beings, Bhagavan says. And he says to Arjuna, you know, I'm going to explain all of this to you because you're my friend. The more complicated we make this, the more difficult it's going to be for anyone to experience it. And if we just say, well, first of all, let's be friends while we talk about this. Because it's just details. We've got to find a way to do this together. As Satish said, the religions became a strategy for control. And yet they were based upon teachers who showed love in their every action, in their every word, in whose presence your heart blossomed again and opened, the hridaya. I am the source of everything. From me, the entire creation flows. Knowing this, the wise adore me with all their hearts. Their thoughts dwell in me. Their lives are surrendered unto me. They derive great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another and conversing about me. To those who are constantly devoted and adore me with purest love, I give the understanding by which they may come to me. Out of compassion for them, I, who am dwelling in their hearts, destroy the darkness born of ignorance with the shining lamp of Vedic Vidya. If we can feel that softly and speak so clearly, and not let those in chaos define the game, this is actually the qualification for being a warrior. It's the insurance policy. You will never be a bully and harm others unnecessarily. This is why the Kshatriyas were the keepers of the Vedic Vidya, because they did not want to harm others. They knew better. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Satish, for being who you are. And for all of you doing this event and making this possible. This is the Sadhu Sangha. This is the satsang that we are all always hungry for.
Yes.
So I feel honored to have been invited, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey G. So in the question and answers, there was something that I also wanted to follow up on because I do think you provided a very valuable tool for us. And this question is directed to Jeffrey G. You mentioned that it would be beneficial for us to learn the alphabet before we speak the language. And it would be key for us, as well as teaching our children, a set of 108 words or so that really enshrine the key aspects of Vedic knowledge. In your teachings, materials, books, do you have a list of those 108 words that you would recommend us to become familiar with on a daily basis?
In the recently published Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive that I did, there is a glossary. What I did was I took all of the colonizing Christian terminology like Lord God, sin, heaven, hell, devil, angel. I took all of those words that should never have been in any Sanskrit translation out. And then I left the most purposeful and important Sanskrit terms in the verses themselves, so that the reader would have to learn a vocabulary of about 108. I like saying that many, but 100 or so Sanskrit words. The next book I'm writing is about how those 108 words create the Vedic worldview and hold it steady for us as a dharana, so that we can then conduct our meditation upon it. So this is the stage of the Vedic Renaissance that we're in, is to slow down, show by example, not colonize. It's not to coerce. It's not to convert. It's to converse in a friendly way and to help everyone restore their true self. And then give them just a vocabulary of about 108 words. So this will be the next book that I'm bringing out in the next 6 months. And the Gita began that process by simply clarifying the text. I didn't write a commentary. I just clarified the verses. Just as Rajiv Malhotra also has pointed out, we need to have our vocabulary of Sanskrit words, so we give the alternative terminology to the people that we're talking with. So at the end of the conversation, they have one new word that lets them hold the Vedic worldview. This will slowly deepen the conversation. Gradually, bits of Brahman, the Akshar Brahman, will be in the mouth and heart and mind of the public. We have the media to do this, the same thing we're doing this with right now. We can reach out to the world with a new terminology that teaches us how to speak with one another lovingly and respectfully. I've said enough. Thank you very much.
The next question I'd like to pose to Satishji. And there are concerns that maybe some of us who are listening in, learning, may not have the centering to really have the intent for the engagement that would be beneficial to us in currently evolving situations. So how do we engage with lawmakers that are removed from the spiritual conversations and still be able to present our viewpoints, our concerns in a meaningful way?
It's a wonderful question and of immense utility. And it's very relevant because we encountered this particular problem here in the United Kingdom in 2013, and then very particularly in 2016, where lawmakers pretty much attacked us in much the same way as the issue is arising now in the United States. And at that time, when I looked around, I found that we did not have people who were experienced or skilled in this engagement. If you can, if I look at the way in which a court of law works, we have what are called solicitors here, whose job is to compile all the data and the evidence. But then we have barristers, and the barrister's role is to be able to take the evidence, weaponize it, and engage in the adversarial process of establishing supremacy of their point of view. Now, that second aspect, we actually have so few people in our community who are experienced, but also who have the swabhav to do that. The Kshatriya Tattva actually delights in that scenario. The Kshatriya Tattva not only delights in that scenario, it delights in creating confrontational scenarios where change can occur. Now, the people who would seek to do us harm and inflict injustice upon us, they're actually very good at this. They have had a lot of experience over a long period of time, and they've been prepared to engage in this field. And we are finding ourselves a little bit late to the battle. I would say that swabhav is more important than knowledge. If you can find people who have got the desire to engage in a battle, and who are willing to risk being completely humiliated, embarrassed, and everything else, and learn from it and become more skillful at it, then those are the ones to whom we then entrust the knowledge and the ammunition which they can use to do this. But we have to train these people. Kshatriya Tattva is very important. And if you have a look at the way in which the system functions, the role of a Brahmin is actually to create knowledge systems which are necessary for the community at any point in time. That is the role of a Brahmin. And so those who are the guides of our society, our gurus, our teachers, they should be trying to seek the Kshatriya Tattva in everybody and pouring whatever they can into it to help that Kshatriya Tattva become nurtured. We have them in our communities. We have both of the energies in our communities. If we can support them, we can make them do this. This is very important. I would say that this is more important than supporting solely the mandirs. In our communities, we have supported the mandirs for 2 generations now, and they have given us the basis in which we can find community, where we can do karmakand, where we can engage in the rites of passage through life. But one responsibility that I think they should now shoulder is to expand their field of operations and to start to teach our Sanatani community what it needs today, what it's going to need tomorrow. And this is a very, very real suggestion and recommendation. Here in the United Kingdom, we were lucky we found 1 or 2 people who appreciated and enjoyed the adversarial, the cut and thrust of engaging with parliamentarians and lawyers and trying to defeat them and get our point of view across. And we managed it. In the United States and elsewhere throughout the world, the Sanatani community needs to find these people, train them, equip them, and launch them, and support them as much as we can. That's what I understand we need to do.
Thank you so much. So in rounding up our conversations, again, our deepest gratitude to our 2 esteemed panelists for, again, calming us down in these turbulent times. I know there is a wealth of written material, conversations out there on social media that we can tune into from time to time. Thank you for the initiative for the Hindu Heritage Month to allow these conversations to take place and begin something new for each one of us. And I hope that we learn, we share, and we grow in our conversations and realize we have a lot more than the day-to-day battles to offer in terms of victory for all mankind. Thank you again for the participation. Jayaji, over to you.
May I just conclude with a mantra, if that's okay? In mandirs we say, Dharm ki vijay ho, adharm ka nash ho, praniyon mein sadbhavna ho, vishwa ka kalyan ho. And I would like to paraphrase it slightly and say, Dharm ki vijay tab hogi, jab adharm ka nash hoga. Fir praniyon mein sadbhavna hogi, aur fir vishwa ka kalyan hoga. Jai Shri Ram.
Yeah, Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you.
So thank you, Paraji. Thank you, of course, Satish and Jeffrey ji. As we bring this day 2 of our ongoing conversation on these important subjects, it occurs to me that we are almost reliving the story of Mahabharata in so many ways. Like the Pandavas, we are the people of Dharma, and yet we are the ones who have suffered. Pandavas were exiled for 13 years, and we, the Hindus, have suffered untold atrocities for 1300 years, maybe even longer. At the end of it all, they asked for nothing but 5 villages so they could just live in peace. And what we ask for, simply to be respected for who we are. And yet that was not to be. So here we are at the what feels like the battleground of Kurukshetra. It is a battle of ideas. It is a battle of narratives. And we are confused, like Arjuna. We are confused. We don't know what to do. So we seek our Krishnas. And here we have Krishna appearing in so many different personalities, Jeffrey ji, Satish ji, Hari ji, Hema ji, and of course Ratan ji. And slowly they are telling us, you have the weapon with you. You always had the weapon. It is your dharma. It is your knowledge, the knowledge that was handed to you by your rishis. And all you have to do is learn it, learn to use it. So with that, I thank you. I thank my Krishna, and we will continue this conversation of Bhagavad Gita for a few more weeks. Thank you so much. Jeffrey ji.
I only want to end with a couple of words. I've invented these words for just this situation. So the first is Kathotriya.
Say it again, please.
Kathotriya.
Okay.
Instead of Kshatriya, it's Kathotriya.
Okay.
And the next is Astras.
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 Love it.
Shastras.
Yeah. Love it. Got it.
There you go.
Thank you. With those words, we bring this to a close. We thank all our participants and all our panelists, and of course, our very able moderators, Richa ji and Paro ji, and look forward to this conversation continuing next weekend and weekend thereafter, and so on and so forth. Namaskar. A good day to all.